What's the good word, y'all? It's your boy DKB here. So we're halfway through the New York Jets preseason, and I wanted to kind of find out how exactly our offense this year compares to last year. And, it's worth putting some caveats out there, right? Obviously, it's preseason, so a lot of what's being, shown out there on film is going to be very vanilla from both the offense and defense, not just on our teams, but of course for the other teams in the NFL as well. You want to try to keep that competitive edge as close to the vest as possible. But still, definitely some other things to consider, right? Year two, 2022, we're talking about year two of Mike LaFleur and that offense that was supposed to be getting built around Zach Wilson. As opposed to this year, we're in year one in Nathaniel Hackett's, although they're supposed to be a strong overlap somewhat in terms of overall philosophy about how they want to go about attacking defenses. We know the tight end should be used more. We know based on Aaron Rodgers' history, which, is hard to figure out how that exactly is being instilled into these other quarterbacks, since we haven't seen Aaron Rodgers in an actual preseason game yet. But we know the running backs are also utilized quite a bit in the receiving game as well. And then overall, we just know, from then to now, the supporting cast as a whole is largely improved, right? We're looking at we were looking at Elijah Moore and Denzel Mims as, essentially our top guys, along with Corey Davis at one point, and now we're talking about Garrett Wilson, Corey Davis, Alan Lazard, Randall Cobb in the mix, maybe a UDFA that steps up. Either way, tight end wise, you're talking about, largely the same room. CJ Uzama, Ruckert, Tyler Conklin in the building, Kenny Yeboah. And then from an offensive line perspective, it's interesting because we have more injury concerns, but you can say that we've improved the offensive line overall when you look at the individual parts as opposed to what we were working with in the year before. So curious to see how all of that works out. Either way, to dive into things here, when I took a look at it, the offense in 2022, we were 2 games in as well, right? 42 completions, 392 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. You compare that to this year, 33 receptions or completions anyways, 342 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. So not only have we taken a step back in completions, we've also taken a step back in areas like yardage while keeping the same touchdown to interception ratio. So basically what this tells me is that we definitely leaned heavier on the passing offense than we did our rushing attack. And, we still had Michael Carter essentially as what we were thinking was going to be RB1, along with, Breece Hall prior to him getting drafted, Ty Johnson. That's the room you're looking at. You fast forward to today, Breece Hall's been out, but we're looking at Michael Carter, we're looking at Bam Knight, we're looking at Israel Bandikonda, and then Travis Dye, our undrafted free agent out of USC, who's actually been fairly involved within the offense, not just during the preseason games, but during the actual training camp practices as well. So, with that said, interesting. We have more weapons now, but we ended up leaning more on Zach Wilson in that arm last year than what I would have expected. You take a look at the rushing attack, and this is directly influenced by bringing on a Keith Carter, by having Nathaniel Hackett in the building, who believes that you should be able to win and have some success in the ground game. So 2022, we're talking about 46 rushes, 189 yards, 2 touchdowns. This year, we're looking at 60 rushes for 194 yards and 1. Now, there's been some things, right? Obviously, we had Israel Bandikonda's near miss for his touchdown, so I'm not, worried about getting into the end zone so much. But the disparity between the rush attempts that we have now, it's only 14, but still, that's essentially another running back that's getting involved here. 14 more rushes, and we are coming out with less yardage than we did the year before. And I think this speaks to the fact that we're still seeing a lot of moving pieces. We're still seeing a lot of, chemistry issues. You have Joe Tippmann, who's mostly been working with the third stringers, but has been getting significant snaps. I think he played the entirety of the Panthers game as well. That's getting adjusted. Actually, he didn't, because Connor McGovern, I think, rolled out with the starters. But nonetheless, you have a first and second unit that has gone through quite a bit of changes between injuries, people being gone, people coming back, position switches, all of that kind of stuff is definitely a factor within this unit. So it's interesting. We'll see what happens on watching things from a stats perspective, and then just kind of going out and seeing the highlights and stuff as well without watching the full games. You would imagine that our offense this year is definitely leaps and bounds ahead of what we were seeing last year. Zach Wilson taking significant steps towards being an acceptable quarterback once again. Granted, it's still preseason. And then we've talked about our weapons, and we can talk about them all day long. But not wholly... we're not necessarily much more effective than what we've seen in the year past. And a lot of that is that there's been more explosive plays and different things of that nature. But I do like the fact, even though our efficiency isn't quite there yet, that we've leaned more heavily on our running backs this go around, as opposed to going out there and, trying to run Zach Wilson into the ground, trusting Tim Boyle to go out there and, throw 30 times a game. Steps forward, right? Obviously, there's you can envision what this offense will actually end up looking like once we get Aaron Rodgers behind the wings, with the glimpses that we've seen so far. And then the biggest piece to me, when it comes to the passing attack, 2022, we had 39 receptions, 392 yards, 3 touchdowns. Tight ends accounted for 18 of those catches, so a 43% target share, and then or at least completion. It'll be different. Target share isn't quite the right word, but the tight ends accounted for 43% of our completions this year. 33 receptions, 342 yards, 3 touchdowns. Tight ends accounted for 42% of our completions. So we're right in line with what we seen last year, which makes a lot of sense. Same weaponry. The usage I thought was going to be vastly different. And so, we're a little bit deeper. There's a little bit more experimentation we have to work out. Kenny Yeboah versus Zach Kuntz. And then, of course, just the gap between Zach Wilson and having a Tim Boyle versus a Chris Streveler, who wasn't playing anything close to what we saw last year, right? So you also have to throw in that, X-factor performance, if you will, last season from Chris Streveler. But nonetheless, it's still interesting to me. I expect that this number will bump up pretty significantly. I didn't get a chance to compare it to what maybe, the NFL league average is for the tight ends, even if it was just based on a preseason level. But this seems like it could be the common denominator here, right? The tight ends are going to be a significant portion of how this offense moves up and down this field. I would have did the running backs, but again, the way we've deployed them this preseason is more so representing the fact that we have Breece Hall, still on the PUP list. And of course, we want to get a really, really good look at some of these guys at the bottom, where, at least in my eyes right now, it seems like Bam Knight is the number one running back, seeing as how he hasn't played in either preseason game, with Michael Carter following him, Israel Bandikonda behind, taking the RB3 place, at least at this point in time. So we'll see what ultimately ends up happening here. If nothing else, I would say, a lot of those factors that we already spoke about is year one of Nathaniel Hackett's offense. Aaron Rodgers hasn't played any of the preseason, whereas they had QB1 last season, which would have been Zach Wilson before, the injury. And it was quick, things going left, and, us defaulting to Mike White and Chris Streveler. So I don't know. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are. Very high level overview wise. I know I'm not super in depth with this, but I figured we'll probably take part of this conversation and bleed this into the Jets Flight Squad podcast as well. But overall, let me know what your guys' thoughts are. Preseason in 2022 versus preseason 2023 for the Jets. Does it seem like we're better, even though the statistics might not necessarily say it? Or do you guys feel like we're kind of on par with where we were at last year, or doing worse? And I'll catch you guys again. Peace.